The rain tapped gently against the kitchen window of the Green household, a polite knock compared to the storm that raged within. Eleanor Green stood at the sink, staring into the steam curling up from the teacup in her hand. Outside, the rooftops of Bath glistened under the damp grey sky. Inside, silence pressed down like a weight she could no longer lift. Victor was late again. Not that she expected anything different. He never texted, never called. The man who once brought her tulips after a long workday now barely offered a nod when he walked through the door. 12 years of marriage had turned their conversations into transactions. Did you pay the gas bill? Lily has piano at 5. Pick up milk. It was Lily who finally broke the silence. Mum, why don't you design anymore? Eleanor turned. Her daughter sat at the small kitchen table, swinging her legs, eyes wide and curious. I mean, Lily continued, you used to make really pretty things. I saw your old sketchbook. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. That sketchbook. She hadn't seen it in years. It must have been in the attic, tucked beneath the boxes Victor never let her throw away. Maybe one day, Eleanor said softly, offering a weak smile. That night, long after Lily had gone to bed and Victor had returned home without a word, Eleanor crept into the attic. Dust floated like whispers in the beam of her torch. She found the box. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the sketchbook from beneath faded cushions and broken lamp parts. The leather cover was cracked, the pages curled, but the drawings still sang. Warm spaces, bold colors, whimsical corners filled with light. Her world. The one she built with her own hands. And then she saw it. Tucked inside the back cover was a folded letter, addressed to herself, in her own handwriting. It was dated 8 years ago. She hesitated. Then she unfolded the paper. Her own voice echoed back at her through the ink. A letter to herself, written just after Lily's birth. A promise. If you ever forget who you are, open this. But before she could read further, she heard it. A footstep on the stair below. Victor. Eleanor froze, clutching the sketchbook to her chest. The attic door creaked. Victor stood halfway up the attic stairs, his brows knitted, his shirt still crisp from work. He did not like messes. Not in the house. Not in conversations. And certainly not in Eleanor. What are you doing up here? He asked, his voice even, but colder than the Bath night air. Eleanor cleared her throat. Just looking for some old things. Victor's gaze dropped to the sketchbook in her arms. Those dusty drawings again. They're not just drawings, she replied, more firmly than she meant to. Victor raised an eyebrow. You haven't touched that book in years. Suddenly you care now. Eleanor said nothing. The letter was still in her hand, folded between her fingers. She slipped it back into the book and closed it. Don't leave things lying around, Victor muttered, already turning away. Lily's got school in the morning. When she came back down, she found her tea had gone cold. She poured it out quietly, as if not to wake the silence. The next morning, Eleanor made Lily's breakfast while Victor scrolled through his phone at the dining table. He was already wearing his suit, tie pinned perfectly straight, eyes scanning emails as if the world outside their windows didn't exist. I was thinking, Eleanor began cautiously, maybe I could start doing part-time again. Teaching design. Victor did not look up. And what about Lily? She's older now. School keeps her busy till 3. I could. He finally looked at her. Let's not pretend we can afford you chasing hobbies. It wouldn't be a hobby. Victor sipped his tea. Everything you earn would be spent on petrol and childcare. It's not worth the maths, Elle. She hated when he called her Elle. He only did it when he wanted to shrink her. Lily entered, dressed for school, her ponytail slightly lopsided. She kissed her mum's cheek and reached for toast. Mummy's going to design again, she said with a grin. Victor's eyes flicked from Eleanor to Lily, then back. No, she's not. Silence fell. Lily's smile faltered. Eleanor looked down at the table, her knuckles white around the edge of the chair. That evening, Eleanor sat alone in the small spare room. Once meant to be her studio, it had become a storage space for ironing boards and winter coats. She cleared a corner, placed her sketchbook down, and opened the letter. Dear me, it began, if you are reading this, it means you've started to believe what he says. That you are small. That you are forgettable. That you don't matter. She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. You matter more than he'll ever admit. Suddenly, a knock at the door. Eleanor. It was Victor again. She closed the sketchbook swiftly. He did not wait for a reply. The door creaked open. I need to talk to you about that savings account. The one in your name. Her heart dropped. He had noticed. Eleanor sat frozen, the sketchbook still on her lap. Victor stood just inside the doorway, his tie loosened, one hand in his trouser pocket. I checked the accounts today, he said, eyes scanning her face. There's money sitting there. A lot of it. Why didn't you tell me? Eleanor hesitated. That account. It had been opened before they were married, funded by a modest inheritance from her aunt. She never closed it, just let it sit, untouched, like a forgotten photograph in a locked drawer. It's mine, she said quietly. Victor gave a short laugh. Yours? We're married, Eleanor. What's yours is ours. I never used it. Not once. And now you think you can. His voice sharpened. This is what all that sketchbook business is about, isn't it? Some fantasy of independence. I don't owe you an explanation. Victor took a slow step closer. You live in my house. Eat the food I pay for. Wear clothes from money I earn. And you think you can draw your way out of that? She stood up. I don't live in your house. I live in our house. And I've given more than you've ever cared to admit. Victor's jaw tightened. I want access to that account, he said flatly. Eleanor looked him in the eye. No. The word hung between them, solid as stone. You'll regret this, Victor hissed. But she didn't flinch. Not even when he slammed the door as he left the room. That night, sleep never came. She sat with the letter in her hand, rereading the lines she had once written with hope. Her past self had known this moment might come. She had even written instructions. If he tries to take from you, remember what is yours. Start with one room. One choice. One truth. In the morning, Eleanor didn't make breakfast. She didn't fold laundry or iron shirts. She drove to the community center in town. There, pinned to a bulletin board, was a notice she had seen many times before. Evening design tutor needed, beginner's welcome. She dialed the number. Her hands shook as it rang. Hello. A woman's voice answered. Yes, Eleanor said, I'd like to apply. For the teaching role. Wonderful, the woman replied. Can you come in for a chat this evening? I'll be there. When she returned home, Victor was already back from work. His coat hung perfectly on its hook, and his expression was unreadable. He looked at her. Where were you? Eleanor met his gaze. Out. With who? Just myself. Victor stepped closer. This isn't how things work in this house. Eleanor didn't blink. Maybe the house is changing. Victor's fists clenched, but before he could speak again, Lily entered the room. Mummy, can you check my drawing? Victor froze, the moment interrupted. Eleanor smiled. Of course, sweetheart. As she walked away, she heard him mutter. This isn't over. But it had already begun. The small room upstairs was no longer a forgotten corner. With every passing evening, Eleanor transformed it inch by inch. The ironing board was folded away, the coats moved to a hallway cupboard. She bought a second-hand desk from a charity shop and placed it by the window. There, with soft golden light streaming through the curtains, she began to draw again. The first design was simple, a reading nook for a child's room. The second, a sunlit kitchen with hand-painted tiles. The third, a gallery space filled with reclaimed wood and tall plants. Her fingers remembered the rhythm, even if her confidence had not fully returned. At the community center, the woman who interviewed her, Mrs. Langley, was warm and brisk. "I won't lie," she said, flipping through Eleanor's portfolio. "You're better than what we usually get." Eleanor smiled shyly. "It's been a long time." "Doesn't show." "You've got the touch." They agreed she would begin next Thursday evening, 2 sessions a week, beginners only. It wasn't grand. It wasn't even well paid. But it was hers. That night, Eleanor told Lily. "Are you really going to teach again?" Lily beamed. "Yes," Eleanor nodded. "Just part-time. I'll still be here when you get home." "I'm proud of you," Lily said simply. Victor, who had been standing in the doorway, scoffed under his breath. "You're chasing pipe dreams, Elle." Eleanor turned to him. "No. I'm remembering who I am." For the first time in weeks, he had no answer. Over the following days, tension brewed beneath the surface of the house. Victor came home earlier. He asked more questions. He hovered. But Eleanor said little. She focused on the class, on preparing her materials, on building something, quietly, steadily. Then one afternoon, she received a letter. The envelope bore the logo of a property agency. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, she found a valuation report. It was for the cottage. Her grandmother's cottage, in the hills outside Bath. The one left to her, long before she married Victor. She had forgotten all about it, until now. The agency had been updating records. They included photos. Ivy-covered walls, a cracked stone path, a broken fence. But it was still there. Still hers. Still untouched. Victor never knew about it. That night, while he was asleep, Eleanor laid out the photos on the desk beside her sketchbook. Her heart thumped with something dangerously close to hope. Then, Lily's voice floated from her bedroom. "Mummy." Eleanor stood quickly and opened the door. "I had a bad dream," Lily whispered. Eleanor sat beside her, brushing the child's hair back from her forehead. "Tell me," she said gently. "I dreamed we were stuck in a house with no doors." Eleanor's hand paused. "And no windows," Lily continued, eyes still closed. "Just walls that got smaller. And Daddy kept saying we had to stay. But I didn't want to." Eleanor swallowed. "I woke up because I heard someone knocking. But when I opened the door, it was you. And you had a key." Eleanor said nothing for a long while. Just held her daughter's hand. Then she whispered, "You're safe now." But her own voice was trembling. Because deep down, she knew. It was time to find that key. The road to the hills outside Bath curled like a sleeping snake, quiet, narrow, and overgrown with weeds that whispered against the car's tires. Eleanor had waited until the morning Victor left for a 3-day conference in London. She packed a small rucksack, left a note for Lily's teacher that she would pick her up late, and drove with the cottage address scribbled on the back of an old electricity bill. She had not been there in over a decade. The cottage stood like a memory made real. Ivy clung to the stone walls like time refusing to let go. The windows were clouded with dust, and the front gate had rotted off its hinges, leaning drunkenly into a tangle of grass. But it was hers. She stepped out of the car and approached the front door. The key still worked. The lock clicked open with surprising ease, and the door creaked like it had been holding its breath. Inside, the air was musty, but beneath the damp smell of disuse, there was something warm. Familiar. The fireplace, still stained with soot. The wooden beams, weathered but strong. Her grandmother's rocking chair, covered in a dusty sheet. She walked slowly through each room, her footsteps echoing. It needed work, serious work. The roof sagged, the kitchen was unusable, and the floorboards in the bedroom bent under her weight. But it was perfect. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt a sense of space that belonged to her and no one else. She opened the windows one by one, letting in the morning light, and stood by the back door, looking out at the garden, wild, overgrown, but brimming with color. She returned that afternoon to pick Lily up from school. As they walked toward the car, Eleanor spoke softly. I found a place. Somewhere quiet. Just ours. Lily looked up, curious. Like a secret? Eleanor smiled. Exactly like a secret. That evening, over toast and jam, Lily asked, can we go there? Can I bring my pencils? Eleanor nodded. Soon. Very soon. But the illusion of peace did not last long. The next day, Victor returned home early. Too early. Eleanor was in the middle of planning her first lesson when he walked in, coat still on, jaw tight. We need to talk, he said. Eleanor stayed seated. About what? Victor tossed a printed email on the table. About this. The agency called me by mistake. Something about a cottage in your name. A valuation report. Care to explain? Eleanor felt the color drain from her face. I didn't know they'd contact you. You didn't know, he repeated mockingly. How long were you planning to keep that hidden from me? I wasn't hiding it. It was never yours. Victor stepped closer. You're making decisions without me now. What else are you hiding? Eleanor stood slowly. You made all the decisions for 12 years. I'm simply taking one back. Victor's hands clenched at his sides. You'd really leave? Start over? You think you can handle that? She looked at him, calm and steady. I know I can. Victor stared at her, searching for a crack in her voice, a tremble in her hands. But there was none. Then came the last blow. You take that cottage, he said coldly, and you can forget about this house. About Lily. Eleanor's breath caught. But before she could speak, Lily's voice came from the hallway. I heard you. They both turned. Lily stood at the edge of the room, eyes wide, face pale. I heard what you said. The room stood still, heavy with Lily's voice. Victor turned sharply, his mouth open as if to speak, but nothing came. Eleanor took a step forward, her gaze never leaving her daughter. Sweetheart, she said softly, go upstairs, please. I'll come tuck you in soon. Lily didn't move. Her eyes darted between her parents, her small hands clenched at her sides. Is it true? She asked. If Mummy goes, I can't come. Victor blinked, caught off guard. Lily, that's not. You said it. Her voice wavered, but her stare remained steady. Eleanor crossed the room and knelt in front of her. You are not a choice to be bargained with, she said gently. No matter where I am, I will always be your mother. Lily threw her arms around Eleanor's neck, holding on tighter than ever before. Victor stood behind them, silent. Later that night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep, her hand still resting lightly on Eleanor's arm, Eleanor returned to the small studio. She did not cry. She did not shake. She simply Saturday. It was over. Not the marriage, perhaps, not yet. But something else. The fear. The shrinking. The silence. The next day, Eleanor packed a weekend bag. Just enough clothes for herself and Lily. Her sketchbook. The letter. The photos of the cottage. A few pencils. She waited until Victor had gone to work and Lily had finished her homework. Then they left. As the city receded in the rearview mirror, Eleanor kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting lightly on Lily's. "Where are we going?" Lily asked, smiling sleepily. "Somewhere with windows," Eleanor whispered. The cottage welcomed them with silence and a soft breeze. They spent that weekend cleaning. Lily swept dust from the stone floor while Eleanor aired out the curtains and scrubbed the kitchen sink. They laughed over a broken tap and found an old photograph of Eleanor's grandmother tucked inside a recipe book. They slept curled up on a mattress they dragged into the living room, beneath a patchy quilt and the soft creak of the rafters above. Eleanor had never felt so exhausted. Or so alive. But the world, of course, was not done with her. On Monday morning, her phone rang just as she was hanging laundry across the back garden. It was Victor. She let it ring. Then it rang again. This time, a voicemail. She pressed play, holding the phone at arm's length, not wanting the sound too close. His voice came through, tight and clipped. "Eleanor. You need to come home. I've spoken to a solicitor. If you don't return, I'll be forced to take action. You've taken our daughter without consent. I won't be made the villain here." She stood still in the garden, the breeze brushing against her face. Lily appeared at the back door, holding a jam jar filled with dandelions. "Mummy, can we put these in the kitchen?" Eleanor nodded slowly, taking the jar. "Yes," she said. "Put them by the window." But even as she smiled, her mind turned. Because the fight was coming. And this time, she would not apologize for standing her ground. The next few days passed like a tightrope walk across glass. Eleanor took Lily to school from the cottage each morning, driving through winding country roads with mist curling over the fields. She smiled when Lily spoke of art class and story time, but every glance in the rearview mirror reminded her of Victor's threat. At night, she marked homework from her new students and drafted designs by candlelight. But she also reread the solicitor's voicemail, memorizing each word, letting them press into her resolve like a branding iron. Then, on Thursday morning, she made an appointment. The solicitor's office was tucked along a cobbled street in Bradford-on-Avon, shaded by a centuries-old sycamore. The building smelled of paper and old polish. Eleanor sat in a leather chair across from a man with round spectacles and ink-stained cuffs. "I need to discuss my rights," she said calmly. He listened. He asked questions. He took notes. When she finished, he leaned back and laced his fingers together. "You are, in legal terms, still the sole owner of the cottage," he said. "Your husband has no claim to it." Eleanor nodded. "And Lily?" He sighed. "Custody is complex. Unless there's danger or abuse, courts will aim for shared arrangements. But, and this is important, your past conduct, your stability, and your preparedness matter." "I am prepared," she said quietly. "Then I suggest documenting everything from today. Where you go, what is said, who is present. Keep a written record. Should this reach court, clarity will protect you." As Eleanor stood to leave, he added gently, "It's not uncommon for women to find their strength in moments like this. Don't let him make you feel unreasonable for claiming space." She paused, then gave him a small smile. "I'm not unreasonable. I'm just not invisible anymore." Back at the cottage, Lily was drawing in the window nook, sketching the overgrown garden in bright pastels. Eleanor kissed her on the head and went to her makeshift desk. She began a new design, this one a renovation plan for the cottage itself. She would make this place beautiful again. That evening, she opened a box from the attic marked letters and bits. Inside, she found postcards from her mother, old school reports, and tucked at the bottom, a letter addressed in her own handwriting. She had written it years ago, before Lily was born, during the first time Victor had shouted so loudly, the neighbors came knocking. She had written the letter as if to her future self. Dear Eleanor, it read, if you're reading this, it means you've forgotten how strong you are. You've let his voice get louder than your own. But remember this, silence is not safety. Obedience is not peace. You are not his to fix, nor his to break. She pressed the letter to her chest, closed her eyes, and breathed. She was no longer writing letters to survive. She was building a life. But the storm was close now. On Sunday night, just after Eleanor tucked Lily into bed, a knock echoed on the cottage door. Not gentle. Not curious. Deliberate. Firm. She opened it slowly. And there stood Victor. His eyes burned with something colder than anger. You've made this into a game, he said. Eleanor kept her voice steady. No. I've made it into a choice. Victor stepped forward. You're going to lose. Eleanor didn't step back. Then Lily's voice came from behind her, small but certain. No, she won't. The silence that followed Lily's words was not the heavy kind that bound Eleanor's chest, as it used to be. It was lighter now, charged with something else, certainty. Victor stood frozen in the doorway, his shoulders tense, his eyes scanning Eleanor as if seeing her properly for the first time. You've poisoned her, he muttered. No, Eleanor replied calmly. You just forgot that she watches. She listens. She remembers. Victor's eyes flicked toward Lily, who stood behind her mother, her hand now clutching the fabric of Eleanor's jumper. I came to bring you back, Victor said, his voice low. This, he gestured around the room, this isn't real. Eleanor turned slowly, eyes moving across the cottage's worn furniture, the fire they had built with their own hands, the jam jar full of dandelions on the windowsill. It's more real than anything we had in that house. Victor stepped closer. You're throwing away everything. I'm not throwing, she said quietly. I'm choosing. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and something flickered behind his eyes, doubt, maybe. Or fear. You think you can manage on your own? With her? I already am. His jaw clenched. You'll never win a custody fight. Eleanor felt her fingers curl slightly, but she kept her voice level. Then we'll let the truth speak for itself. And if Lily must choose where she feels safe, I trust her. Victor opened his mouth, but no words came. Eleanor took a step forward. You may be Lily's father, but being a parent isn't about control. It's about care. And if you loved either of us in the way you claimed, you would never have made her feel like a price I had to pay. Victor's mouth twitched, but he said nothing. His coat rustled slightly as he shifted on his feet. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Eleanor finished, her tone soft but unwavering. Victor stared at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out the door. The sound of his footsteps on the gravel path faded into the trees. Eleanor closed the door behind him, locking it with a soft click. Then she turned to Lily. Her daughter looked up at her, small and steady. Is he gone? For now, Eleanor replied. Lily hesitated. Will he come back? Eleanor knelt down and looked into her daughter's eyes. Maybe. But the difference is, next time, we won't be afraid. They stayed in silence for a while. Then Lily smiled. Can we paint the windows? Eleanor laughed, a light, full laugh that hadn't come out in years. Yes, she said, we'll paint them all. Weeks passed. The cottage bloomed again. Lily's drawings now filled the walls. Eleanor taught 2 nights a week and spent her days redesigning the very place they now called home. There was no ruling judgment, no court battle, just a quiet agreement from Victor's solicitor to leave things as they were, so long as they kept Lily in school and within reach. Eleanor had won. Not by fighting louder, but by standing still. And Lily, once shadowed by silence, now sang to herself in the garden, her voice floating through the windows Eleanor had cleaned, opened, and painted with her own hands. The house with no doors and no windows was gone. This house, this one had plenty.